Today, we're going to explore powerful ways to connect with your son or daughter and have a lasting legacy. We're going to focus on the story of Pastor Jim Berglund. He has written 2 books full of actionable steps that yield powerful results toward connection with your kids. He also has a powerful story of his own to share about connecting with his own kids. We'll explore all this in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. This program is made possible by financial support from Smile Online Course and Books. Smile Online offers online courses for teens and young adults designed to help them master social and career skills. Subject matter includes customer service skills, job interviewing, electronic etiquette, and managing stress. For more information, visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge, a movement to awaken and inspire fathers everywhere to take great pride in their role and to challenge society to understand how important fathers are to the stability and culture of their family's environment. Now, here's your host, Jonathan Guerrero.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in part 1 of this episode called How to Connect with Your Kids. My guest is Pastor Jim Berglund. This episode is special for me because a while back in December of 2021, I had his son, Pastor Josh Hester, on the program in an episode called A True Story About the Power of a Father's Love with Joshua Hester. In that episode, we heard Pastor Josh's testimony of how my current guest, Pastor Jim Berglund, connected with him, led him to discover and know Jesus, and also went the extra mile and adopted him as his own son and mentored him into ministry. Today, Pastor Berglund will share his own side of the story. Pastor Berglund, thank you so much for being on the Fatherhood Challenge.
I appreciate so much the opportunity to spend some time together.
Well, here's one of my favorite questions to start with. What is your favorite dad joke?
Well, I guess if I were going to pull that together, I would say, who's my favorite comedian? And I would say it's Samson because he brought the house down.
Never heard that one before, but boy, is it good. Let's start with your story of how you met Joshua Hester, how he became your son.
Well, it worked like this. My daughter was attending a school where he was at, and she came home and said, "Hey, there's this kid at school who's just like you. And he's come from a difficult background. And I just think it would be great if you could connect with him and meet him." And so we arranged for him to come with my daughter and a couple other kids come to our house. Just before that, in our kitchen, we had a kitchen bar that was there. And with that, there's all around that kitchen bar, there were tiles. And I was waiting for them to come. And so I was skipping from tile to tile in just kind of a patterned way. So when the kids came, I, of course, stopped that and before they even came in. And then it wasn't 10 minutes later, Josh was skipping in the pattern, going back and forth around without ever having seen me do it. He did exactly the same thing. And it just struck me immediately like, wow, this guy is very much like me. So we hit it off initially just really well about his background and where he was. And it was then that I began to understand a little bit about his background. He, and I know he shared his story, but virtually his mother was an alcoholic, and he got taken away from her because he was driving with her, being intoxicated with him in the car. And so he was taken away and put in foster care, introduced through that foster care system into a religious home. The grandmotherly figure there, Alita, ended up being a big part of his connecting with spiritual things. So when it came time to camp meeting, she brought Josh to camp meeting. I saw him there, just met him. And then as time went on, I found his background with all this connection that's going on, that he wanted to be a Bible. He wanted to share the Bible. He wanted to find out what it was about. So what I did is he ended up going to academy there at Gem State Academy. And I lived about 3 miles from there. And so we started arranging time to have Bible studies. I would get up in the morning and drive over. So like at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, because it was the only time he had free, we'd have Bible study together like 3 to 5 days a week. And we just started that process doing Bible study together and becoming more acquainted. And then I started doing things with him, and he started inviting me to his things that he was doing. He was involved in everything, sports, music. I mean, we were there every night of the week. We could pretty much be there to do something. And that's when I had to decide, how much involvement I was going to do with this guy. And because he was asking me to these different events that he was having, I went through, and he was starting to do this preaching series. And I was one of the mentoring pastors for this preaching series. And I chose Josh to be the person that I mentored, one of the three I think I mentored. And so I worked with Josh as he did presentations. And when he did his first sermon, I was just overwhelmed with how genuine and good a process. And I immediately recognized that he had a spiritual gift for preaching. I mean, it's just like, it was so clear, something he'd never done before. And he got up and shared, and all the rest of the kids realized that too, and complimented him on it. It was at the end of the series that he preached, after I'd done Bible studies with him for, I don't know, over a year, I guess, that I baptized him after the series that he'd preached. So that's kind of a unique scenario there. Later, I started recognizing he was struggling in lots of different areas. He had a quick anger. Like he would get angry, he'd take his cell phone and just throw it as far as he could outside, smash against the pavement. One time in my car, he took and doubled up his fist and punched the light on the top of the car and broke it. He'd take a pencil and just stab himself with the pencil. Just free-floating anger that had no, way beyond what the frustration of the moment was. But it was tied to a whole bunch of other elements for him. So I started seeing these things and started doing some counseling and support in that way. And flirting was one of his big issues. He was super flirtatious. With all the girls, all the pretty girls. And he got a girlfriend and then broke up. And that was devastating. I was there counseling him as he broke up, and he just broke down crying. And I was sitting there on the bed with my arm around his shoulder as he was crying. And he just said, I have nobody that cares about me. I have nobody to share my struggles with. I have nobody that really knows who I am. And I went home that night with God putting on my heart saying, he doesn't have anybody. Well, why not you? Why not you do that? And I prayed through the night virtually on that. And then the next day also, and then asked my wife, I said, I really have God put on my heart that we should take this boy in. He doesn't have anybody else. His mom's disconnected from him. He's just struggling with having a purpose, and I really feel like God wants me to do that. And so she prayed about it too and agreed. And then I came in and started talking to Josh, and we'd done lots of things together. We'd taken him on different little outings and stuff together. But this was a different step. And I just came to him and shared with him, Josh, here's what's going on for me, is that God's put on my heart that I could be your father. And I've decided, I've made that commitment to God that on my side, I'm willing to be your father. But that's only part of it, because I'm not willing to be your father unless you're willing to be my son. I mean by that you have to take on and treat me as a father, just as I'm going to treat you like a son. And then I outlined what that meant as far as, we're going to be spending time together. I'll be there for you. And then I just said, here's the deal. What I'm doing is I'm telling you, I'm going to be there for you. I won't leave you. You don't have to go from place to place. I'll be your dad. And he just started crying. And then just said, I don't think that's going to work because I'm going to take advantage of you. What's going to happen is I'm going to use you. I'll use you for my needs. That's what I always do. I just go from person to person, and like a hummingbird, just take from those people to meet my needs, because that's how I grew up, is finding people to help meet my needs. And you've been nice to me, and I don't want to take advantage of you. And so he said, no, I really don't think that that's going to work. So I just waited. I just said, okay, I hear you. And I waited for several days and didn't make any connection with him. And then showed up at where was our usual time for doing Bible studies, showed up, knocked on his dorm room, went in and started talking to him and just said, here's the deal, Josh. I haven't changed my mind. From my side, I'm willing to be your dad. But that's only going to take place if you're willing to be my son. You've told me that you're going to take advantage of me. You can't take advantage of me. I've already told you I love you. So I'm giving my love to you. You can't take from me what I'm already willing to give. So it's not going to be something that you're doing something for me that I don't want to do. And as far as taking care of your needs, I'm going to do whatever I can, just like my other kids, to take care of them. I'm going to do everything I can to meet your needs. That doesn't mean I can take care of all your needs, but I'll do whatever I can to make that happen. And reluctantly, he went through that process, and he agreed. Even though he agreed, it took forever for him to call me dad or say that he loved me or any response in that kind of sense. One of them was Josh hadn't had birthday events, and so we did birthdays for him and did treasure hunts. And part of his whole process was that when you look at psychology, he had an attachment disorder. That is, that he couldn't attach to people because of fear that if attaching, he'd have to give of himself, and that he didn't want to do that because then he'd owe somebody. So part of that whole attachment disorder was to say, I had to work with him through what that meant and how to deal with that. And on his birthday, I gave him a card that said to his son, and was just there as a recognition of that connection that we had. And he looked at the card, just glanced at it, put it aside, and didn't say a single word. And it kind of miffed me at first, like, my goodness, I went and picked this card out. I wrote things inside of it that I thought were going to be powerful for you, and it had zero effect on you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. It's his birthday, but this week we're going to talk about it. And so I came and I just said, okay, so when you got that card, what was going on in your mind? And he said, oh, nothing. I said, you didn't notice that it said to his son from dad? Yeah. So how did that make you feel? He said, good. I said, you showed zero response or emotion to that. How come? He said, I don't know. I didn't know I was supposed to show any emotion. I said, well, so how do you show that somebody has shown you they love you? Because that's what it was. And so we went through and talked about the 5 different ways that people show love. Because he broke down and started crying and said, I have no idea how to love. And we don't recognize it, but all the way through, parents show their kids how to respond in love. You give them something to say. What do you say, right? You say thank you. You tell them and you teach them and you train them how to respond in love. Josh had not had any of that. So he genuinely didn't know what it meant. He said, the only thing I know about how to love is what I've seen on movies. That's the only thing I know. And almost none of the movies are really about a dad and a son. They're about, men and women and romantic relationships. So I really don't know how to show love in this kind of relationship. I have no clue. So we went through each of those steps and literally outlined, okay, so when somebody gives you a card, you say thank you. And when somebody does something for you, and there's different levels of how you respond to show love. And what it's doing is you're saying to that person, I accept your overture of love to me, and I want to respond back to tell you that I love you too. So your response back is a way of accepting that. And what that does is that causes the bond to grow more and more. And then at the point that you refuse that, what you're telling somebody is that you don't want to go closer. And what's happening is you're trying to close off getting closer by not showing, not admitting, not entering into that relationship to show love. So if you're going, so we literally outlined, okay, so if somebody gave you their kidney, that's going to be much different than giving you their place in line, right? There's a huge amount of difference in how you would express that. When somebody gives you a gift, if they give you something that they got from the dime store, okay. But if they gave you something that cost them a year's wages, there's a huge difference in how you want to let them know that you recognize their overture of love to you. For the first part of our relationship, a huge part of it was training Josh in how to love, respond in love. He would come and we'd be on a big beanbag, right? And he'd sit beside me on the beanbag, but he'd make sure that there was not a chance that we would touch because he was afraid to do that. He didn't want to say, I love you. And I remember in my mind, the first time he said, I love you. I remember in my mind, the steps that it took for him. I remember that he could hardly choke out the words because he didn't know how it would be received and he felt embarrassed to say it. But what happens is that's part of demonstrating and helping somebody to learn to do that. And so for me, it was the whole process of saying, I'm teaching the boy, and we have to pick up the years that he lost as a child. And so we did just that. Part of the attachment disorder and looking at psychologists on how to help with the attachment disorder is to go through the things that they missed as kids. So we would scuffle on the floor. We would have airsoft gunfights. I'd wrestle with him on the floor. All things that you would normally do or often do with my other kids who did it from the time they were children. I did it with him in the best way that I could think of that was appropriate for, I think he was 12 at the time, 12 or 13 at the time, that I was appropriate for that kind of connection so that we could rebuild that connection in how that he'd lost to help him to learn to be attached. And then we had to access what it was that was this deep-seated sense of anger, because it was like there was a pool of anger. And if you stub your toe, it's one thing. But if your toe is already broken and you stub it, the amount of pain that it causes is much more. Josh had a center full of pain that was stored up. And so the slightest touch caused these igniting to go on because he never released that pain over being rejected, over not having a family like others had, over not knowing his dad, over having multiple men go in and out of his life, over his mother not doing the things that he needed to. All of those things had built up to where he didn't address them, and they were part of that inner core of anger. And so part of what we did was go through and work on those things, so tell me how you felt when you realized you didn't have a dad. Well, how did that feel to you? And just work through that process to help him deal with what was going on for him. And through that process, Josh is a really good communicator. And when it comes to being able to teach him how to communicate, that's the work. One of the things that I've done with all my kids is there's 5 different levels of communication. And what happens is, I don't know if you're familiar with those, cliches are the first ones, facts are the second ones, the third ones are thoughts, the fourth are feelings, and the last is intimacy. What's my joys, hurts, and needs? What happens is almost always each step takes a little bit more commitment of giving myself to somebody else or being vulnerable to somebody else. Reporting a cliche, hi, how are you, does almost zero need for reporting, right? But when you get to the highest level, then what happens is when you're at that level, you are risking somebody rejecting who you really are. Communicators tell us that it takes almost 30 minutes to get to the part of thoughts. And you watched even people getting together who've not been together for a while. Hey, how are you? Doing fine. Here, let me report on what's been going on for me. This is the things that have happened for me, the facts. But, I've been thinking that this, after 20 minutes, I've been thinking that this is what's going on. And then ultimately to the level of feelings. So what happens in our relationships is that unless we spend focused time building to those deeper levels, we'll just be reporting at a superficial level, and it doesn't build bonding between us, nor does it have time for us to open up. And if people do open up prematurely, it's because they're so desperate for reaching that intimacy level that they're willing to risk it, just because they need connection. So, and this is something I built with my kids before they left home. I just said, okay, here's the deal. We have to stay connected. That's part of my heart. I want to be with you. And we know these levels of communication because I talked to them all about it. So here's the deal. I need to have you commit to me an hour a week that we talk about us. What's going on with you, what your life is like, where's going on, because it takes that long for you to do your reporting and then get to what's really going on feeling wise. Other than that, we can spend as much additional time as we want connecting in short ways and fast ways and even longer ways. That's all awesome, but we need to have that focus time. So for each of my kids, I have an hour set aside every week that we do just that. Communicate on that level and move to that intimacy. Now, when they call me, they're already at that level that they're not afraid to just jump into the intimacy part because we're already in that relationship where they know that I care about them. They know they're loved. They don't have to hide things from me because we deal with the real part of life. And so with that, then they're able to open themselves in that way and share what's really going on and get past the facade that we often play with each other. A key through going through the teen years is creating that intimacy level ahead of time with your kids so that that's a part of it. And they're going to say, oh, Dad, and they'll say things, but it's just a regular part that ends up being a center of knowing that they're loved. This is probably not exactly on Josh, but it fits with this part of the story or the concept. At Christmas time, we do what we call a love circle. The love circle started with my wife and I, and we did it every year at Christmas time. We'd stop, and for a year, for an hour, we would say different things about where we were at with our intimacy toward each other. This is what I love about you. One of the things I recognized this year and how you've grown. And then we would start even doing it with others. We had some friends that we included in that love circle. When our kids came along, we started the love circle with them. And every Christmas, we have this love circle and we sit around and we talk about, each of us talk about that person. It's their time now. And so with each person, we went through and say, this is what we love about Mom. And we all talk about things and, this was awesome this year and you did this. And I see so many things you've grown with. And I know we had this difficulty during the year and how you did it. And so we do that every year at Christmas time and have the love circle. So when Josh comes into our family, we have the love circle. And during that, he breaks down as well and because we start telling him how much we love him and, that he's a part of our family. And he just is overwhelmed with that. And then he goes, and when he leaves home, he takes it to his girlfriend's family. They do it when they get married. That love circle is so powerful in affirming that you're cared for, that it becomes just a central part. For the last 38 years, they've come home at Christmas time and done the love circle ever since they've left. And we'll say, hey, what are we going to, let's do some things. No, wait, we got to do the love circle. We've got to do the love circle this year. So you would think that it might grow old, but honestly, there are new things that happen and growth that happens. And somehow we don't get tired of hearing that somebody recognizes awesome things in us and cares about us and reaffirming that and recognizing it. And hardly a year goes by that we aren't all crying by the time it's done in that process of affirmation for each other. And so it is setting the culture in the family. It's okay to be real about what we're at. And that if that love is a center of the family and part of our mission to support each other toward the kingdom, that we can do almost anything and mess up and come back and share with our group, this is where I'm struggling with. And instead of it being a place where they're judged, it's a place where they're affirmed and supported. Josh once said, I realize there's a difference in our family than other families because one of my friends and I did something that we both thought was wrong and we needed to work on. And his response is, I can't let my dad know. And my response was, I want to talk to my dad about how to work. Difference in the environment we set. If our kids think that we're out to attack them, then they're not going to want to share when they're broken or hurt or something's happening in their life or they've messed up or they've done it wrong, especially if we've told them this isn't the way to do it and then they've done it wrong. They didn't want to face that judgment. But if what they're facing is somebody who they know cares about them and loves them through their brokenness, they're going to be willing to share that.
In your story, I am seeing endless parallels between our human experience and our relationship with God. I'm seeing my own story and my own struggles to try to get to know the nature of who God really is. All of these things I'm seeing in my own experience, and I know others can probably highly relate to this as well. And where we're ending now is you talking about Josh's reaction and your response to that. And the thing that's flashing in my mind right now is the story of the Garden of Eden, where God knew all of this stuff was going to happen. He knew they were going to sin. He knew they were going to mess up. And yet he created them anyway, created the environment of free will and choice, and allowed them to be able to still make that mistake. And when they made that mistake, his first response was not condemnation, but questions. We're going to pause here and wrap up part 1 of how to connect with your kids. How to connect with your kids. And we'll pick up in our discussion on the image of God. And we're also going to discuss Pastor Berglund's books. He's written 2 of them, and we'll mention them specifically and go into detail about the books, what inspired the books, and how you can get your copy. And that will be in part 2 of how to connect with your kids.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fatherhood Challenge. If you would like to contact us, listen to other episodes, find any resource mentioned in this program, or find out more information about the Fatherhood Challenge, please visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.